Rey is in Maz Kanata's castle, and she finds Luke Skywalker's lightsaber for the first time.
Enjoy.
In this scene, she is drawn to this place, almost like Cinderella, and she goes to this box, which, when she opens, she discovers something that, of course, has no meaning to her. She's never seen this before, doesn't know what it is, but has meaning to the audience.
By the way, really quick, that female voice you heard, Enjoy, I needed to stop it and tell you, because if I was listening, it'd be driving me nuts. Who was the woman that just spoke? I pulled the audio from the Star Wars, the weekly, the Star Wars show on YouTube, because these clips were scattered all over the place in different media outlets. So I actually grabbed this clip from the Star Wars show, and so that was Andy Gutierrez from the Star Wars show queuing up the clip itself. So that's the female voice you heard. Here's more of the commentary.
Touching the lightsaber triggers what we called the Force back. There were many iterations of this. In one, from this Cloud City corridor, she looked down and saw Vader fighting Luke, which we ended up cutting. We wanted it to be a more personal story, something that she couldn't comprehend, that was overwhelming to her, frightening to her, that was taking her through all these elemental experiences of fire, of rain, snow, wind, but also that she was being confronted with truths about the Force, about the past, the Knights of Ren here, the past for herself. She realizes the cries she heard were actually her own cries as a young girl being taken away from her family. And then she hears a voice, Rey, and that's Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Now, again, and I think I've mentioned this in previous podcasts, but we've also been told by somebody inside the story group that essentially the Force back scene was showing, it was originally going to show sort of a history of the movies. That was at least what I've been told. Now, or let me back up. The history of the lightsaber itself. So it was supposed to be, the lightsaber was supposed to be a catalyst to kind of give Rey a bit of a track of what had happened to the lightsaber from Anakin to Obi-Wan to Luke to having his arm chopped off, and then to it landing in her hands, whatever the Knights of Ren scene was, and then of course at the very, very end, not only does she hear the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is one of the examples of how she might be related to Kenobi, since Kenobi's reaching out to her at the end of the clip, but also she sees the forecasting of the battle on Starkiller Base with Kylo Ren and the lightsaber. And suddenly I oddly find myself talking like J.J. Abrams. I don't know how that happened. All right, one more, and this is my favorite one, and then we'll talk a bit about how Daisy Ridley and Rey made it from great to good, because this leads right into it. I love this clip. It's a minute 24. J.J. Abrams talking about what they added to the lightsaber fight on Starkiller Base, my favorite scene in the entire The Force Awakens, between Rey and Kylo Ren. The two things he's talking about is the pivotal moment where you get the up close, and he'll describe it, but just so specifically. The pivotal moment where they're on the precipice of the chasm that has opened up because they blew up the oscillator, close up on Rey's face, and he says, I can show you the ways of the Force, and she says the Force, she closes her eyes, she channels it, and comes back and kicks his butt. The other thing he talks about, and again, he'll describe this, but this just kind of helps out a bit, because you're getting visuals when you watch these clips online and when you would watch the commentary. The other part he's talking about is right before they end up clasped together, sort of in a circle, and she's digging his tri-saber into the snow, and they're locked arm in arm. There's this slow motion where she does this overhead swing with this angry look on her face. That's the other part that he's talking about. Here, listen to this.
I also showed this film, an early cut, to my friend Ava DuVernay, and she had a bunch of great suggestions. One of them was that she really wanted to see Daisy in her attack on Ren coming up to have one really cool moment. I'll show you the shot that we ended up getting per her suggestion. But we always had this moment from when we shot it originally. And this used to be where she called him a monster. and then pushed back. But instead, we reshot this and had her take this moment of hearing the Force. And
now, real quick, and I'll crank it back up again. But what he's saying there is he says, "I'll show you the ways of the Force." When they first meet up in the forest after Han Solo's killed, she says, "You're a monster," and goes to pull up her blaster, and he force throws her against the tree. According to what JJ is saying, originally that didn't happen, and it was here where he says, "I'll show you the ways of the Force." She says, "You're a monster," and then she fights back. What I love about this, though, and why, especially when you consider all of the controversy, if you've been following it, around Rogue One and the reshoots, this scene wouldn't have been nearly as good if it had just been Rey saying, "You're a monster," and then fighting back against Kylo. They needed her to channel the Force. They needed some representation of that. And that moment when she closes her eyes, like, I wish I had a framed poster of that shot, because it's my favorite shot of the whole movie, when she's just when they're locked saber to saber and she's closing her eyes and channeling that very moment. That's one of the moments, and I have a list here, that's one of the moments that to me takes the movie from good to great, because of Daisy Ridley's performance, where she says the Force, closes her eyes, and then just comes back to kick his ass.
Thinking about what Maz had told her about closing her eyes and letting it in. And so she has this incredibly internal moment that is sort of extended in kind of movie time, where she basically feels it, accepts it, and is now ready to kick his ass. So here's the shot that we got from the reshoots. This one here, ready? And that. Boom. It's a little thing, but it really connects you to her intensity.
Now, to me, and by the way, my son Logan is not in The Force Awakens. You may have heard him in the background there. Like I said, I had to go kind of old school recording the clip, and my office is directly below a hardwood floor, and Logan was right above me playing video games at the time. So, anyway, so it's those moments to me, and I started to make a list, and then I realized that it was entirely too long. Whether or not Rey/Daisy Ridley was directed to do so, or she did these little things on her own, there are these moments with this character that I absolutely love, that to me really take the movie from a good place to a great place. And there are these little tiny subtle moments that Daisy Ridley brings to the character Rey. One of them was that moment, the lightsaber fight there at the end, and I'm kind of working in reverse. But again, that moment in the film, where they are classed together, where she does that overhead and she's standing there almost like a predator. I love that moment. The moment that I spoke about a moment ago, where she says the Force and she closes her eyes. There's all these subtle moments throughout the film that to me just bring the film to a level of just infinite watchability, because her character is so watchable. So I started making a list here, and I have just a few minutes left before we're out of time for today's podcast. But going to the very beginning of the movie, you don't even see her face, but the first time you see Rey on screen, when she's pillaging the Star Destroyer, and she actually has the coverings on her face and the goggles, the subtlety in the way that she yanks out the part from the side of that compartment in the Star Destroyer. The next time you watch it, look how she the way she jerks it out. It's just, there's little tiny moments. It was just different enough to where it was unique and different, like almost telling a piece about the character and her strength, the way she kind of yanks it out. Riding down the hill, of course, on the sled of junk was another one of those moments. The ever so slight smirk, it was almost whimsical when she puts on the Rebel X-Wing fighter helmet. When after she's made her meal, sitting right at the foot of the AT-AT, she picks it up and she shakes the sand out of it and she puts it on and she sits there and kind of jostles her head around and just has the ever so slight smirk. When BB-8 is after she's rescued him from Tito, and BB-8's there basically begging her in bleeps and bloops to come back with her, and she does this sort of terse head tilt and eye roll to have him come with them. And again, the list is already starting to get too long. I'm going through every scene. After the explosion, the TIE fighter attack, before they get on the Millennium Falcon, after the explosion, when Finn is knocked out and she walks over and Finn says, "Are you okay?" And she just looks at him and goes, "Yeah, I'm fine." In the Millennium Falcon, there's a bunch of these little tiny moments in the Millennium Falcon when they're taking off of Jakku. The get ready one was probably the most specific one. Of course, when they meet on the Millennium Falcon and after they had that little circular exchange of talking about what they've just accomplished, and Rey introduces herself and she has this smile on her face. And to me, that would almost lend itself sort of back to what J.J. Abrams said about falling for Finn, if she indeed did, because Finn asked her name and she almost seems, flattered that he asked her name. Of course, the one of my other favorite sort of comedy moments in the film, when she is trying to patch up the Millennium Falcon before Han Solo shows up, and they have that over there, no, looking for the tape. There's one more moment, and then we got to wrap things up. And again, I have just a whole bunch of these different examples, but there's one other moment, and that is right after they land on Takodana. And they're getting ready to walk over to Maz Kanata's castle. Han Solo talks to her about giving her a job, and she says, "Are you offering me a job?" And then it's like it doesn't pay much, and she says, "If you were, I'd be flattered, but I got to get home. I've already been gone too long." And Han says to her, "That's unfortunate. That's a bummer. Chewie was just starting to like you." Right as Han steps out of frame, it's a side shot, a profile shot of Daisy Ridley, and she does this little tiny sort of nose tweak. Like she understood, obviously, what the rest of us understood, because she's sort of playing the role of us watching this whole thing, being the viewer, that Han was really talking about himself, that he was starting to really like her. And she picks up on that, and she does this little sort of subtlety of a nose tweak. And again, that character, and I hope that Rian Johnson does as good a job of directing Daisy, because it's one of the things that J.J. Abrams does best, as J.J. Abrams did for Episode 8. Because to me, Daisy Ridley and Rey is, again, what made The Force Awakens from being a good Star Wars movie to a rewatchable great Star Wars movie. And with that, we're out of time. Boy, it goes by fast when you're talking about Star Wars. Thank you so much for hanging out on the podcast this week. Again, if you ever want to email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. talkshownerd@gmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter @Jon Justice, and Facebook as well. I hope you have a fantastic week, and until episode number 65 of the My Nerd World Star Wars podcast, may the Force be with you always.